I'm Bethany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing at the individual and the collective level.
Join us as we invite guests to share their personal paths to freedom.
I have an organization. I just believe basically I'm a hybrid of internal and external transformation. And so I work on CLG in the internal space, and I work on environmental justice and climate restoration as a way to make the internal thing that I work on have a landing place on the outside of me.
Yeah, Bethany, why don't you tell her what you do so y'all can see how closely connected you are?
Well, I'm a coach for CLG, and I also do environmental advocacy and justice work. So I work on like equity in the supply chain, like with farm labor, and also like environmental justice with agriculture as the catalyst. So regenerative agriculture and carbon drawdown through ecological rebuilding. So yeah, similar stuff. And I absolutely like, I'm constantly playing with like, how do you do activism, from a place of like wholeness and trust and creating change from that place rather than the more familiar places, I guess. So yeah, I'm playing with the same stuff.
Beautiful. So lovely. I just love congruence when it shows up this way. It feels the world feels so friendly and welcoming.
Like, tell me more. I mean, I work for a company that does this work. So I really, basically my company has a mission around this, but we're in the natural product space. We make multivitamins, like food-based multivitamins and herbal supplements and stuff. It's called Mega Food. Where's the, yeah, it's a great company. I've been there for 10 years. But where do you do this work? Like through what venues and what do you do?
I founded an organization back in 2012 called Sacred Keepers Sustainability Lab. And the idea here was that there needed to be a more holistic and tender way of approaching climate justice and climate change. And the thing that I was really, really thinking about was the whole-centered values and shifting a consciousness. Wangari Maathai is one of my sheroes. And she basically says that she doesn't want to have to save a planet. She wants to create a culture of humans where a planet does not need saving. And so my work of kind of thinking about environmental justice is really through eco spiritualism and just thinking more about, just like it is, we have places to tend to within ourselves, within our consciousness that we know we need shoring up. And so the same for the planet. And the state and the health of any community is directly reflective of the health of the consciousness within that collective. And so I just always believe that there needs to be like full congruency between what we work on the internal space, because often communities of color, there's either a lot of internal spiritual showing up in a community that doesn't reflect those values, or vice versa. We're living in communities where the value systems are not congruent to how we feel internally. And so I'm always tinkering in how do we tinker with the consciousness and then tinker with the environment as an extension of that humanity versus a thing we got to go fix, but just a thing that we need to be in more harmony with. And how those things can support our whole being.
That resonates really strongly. My experience is that my body brought my attention to agriculture. I'm kind of hypersensitive, and I had this life-threatening allergic reaction to a pesticide, to Roundup. And I like started learning a lot about agriculture. This is like going back a minute, like maybe 12 years or so, or something like that, 10 years, 12 years. But and yeah, I like moved into, I had a master's in regulatory affairs and health policy. Like I was learning all about how to work with governmental structures around policy and, found myself in a world, actually at a company, and in a world where they were really interested in what I had to say about things and what I was interested in. And we've kind of been like, yeah, it's been like a big transformation over the last 10 years. But what I noticed is when I started working directly with farmers, because we direct source from like herbalists and farmers, is the dissonance between like business, which has this very linear, growth-minded like path, and it's very like, they set a goal and they go towards it, and it's this really, really linear feeling structure. And we're taking things, make an exchange from this structure where it's like every time I talk to a farmer, every time I'm on a farm, it's so much about the entire ecosystem and balance, their complete surrender of cycles and seasons and things, and like death and rebirth, and paying close attention and like responding and being in this dance. And I felt this like, oh wow, it feels so different. So a lot of my work is helping people in my world. I feel very comfortable in that linear, buy me, like creator place. Those are my people, and I know how to talk to them and stuff. Helping them tap into the intelligence of being with things in this other way as well. That's like a more in tune, surrendered experience, and like using that as a way to help people think a little differently. And then my goal for the company is to mostly at this point listen and learn, and be like a little bit of translators for people who have no real sense of agriculture and how things grow, and like where our food comes from, and all the life that's teeming, and like, how all of that, what's happening ecologically at that level. Like I'm in service. I just love learning about it. I'm constantly awed by it every day at work. And then I try to talk to people about it and help them understand it too. And reimagine the ways that they do business, And just, it's been really interesting this last year with, all of the social things that have been coming to the forefront. And suddenly it's like this automatic part of the brand playbook to like immediately respond to whatever cultural trends happening on that day and have a position on it. And I'm like, y'all don't have positions on these things. Why are you pretending that you do? Like, there's this really interesting pressure for companies to be more than somebody selling a thing. And, that's always been true in my little space of natural products, and the pressure is growing. And so I just think it's this really interesting energy that I'm interested in tapping into, because to me, it's a change agent energy. They're terrified, in one way, but it's like, what do we want to do with this energy? And so I'm interested in what does that look like? What does conscious activism look like as a brand? And there's lots of, did you guys see the Bo Burnham special that just came out on Netflix? It's called Inside. He's a comedian, and he did a little skit where he was pretending that he was like a new brand, like, social manager, like posturing that he's like, that it's really important for Butterfinger to know where, to say where they stand on this, that, and we're going to save the world with like the parody of brands being like, we stand for, and like,
We stand with.
Yeah. And I'm excited for us to make fun of all of it and actually really consider like, what do we want to, what we're powerful and we're making money. I mean, that we're in a system where we have some power. So what are we doing with that? And how are we being with it? And all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I've been doing some speaking stuff around that in my industry, and that's kind of fun. It's edgy, I think, for the industry.
I think that like before I became a what I am now, I was in corporate for 22 years, working pretty much in the communications, PR space, advertising. And so spent a lot of time with the people who think a lot about consumers. And the thing that I think it all represents is it's not just like a demand for companies to take a position. I look at it as a reflection of consciousness is shifting around the consumer and what the consumer is expecting the company to be thinking about. So it's not just ingredients on the back of a package anymore that make it okay for me to buy this thing. Now I'm wanting to know the consciousness by which the organization is running. I want to know where the dollars that my money is, what are the CEOs doing with the cash? I'm not just interested in the transactional aspects of this product anymore. I'm interested in the transformational aspects of this product. And the issue is that the demand is far greater than our ability as conscious leaders to step into these organizations and shift them. And so some of it becomes performative until it can become real. And that's kind of the icky that I feel sometimes with, my phone rings, the demand is here. There's a brown woman out there with a conscious leadership hat. Let's call her and tell her to come in here so that we can look like we're doing the thing. And then when you really, as y'all know, peel back and say, are you really ready to commit? Are you really ready to do the deep, transformative, painful things that are required to shift this culture? No, but we wanted it to look that way.
Or they don't even know, because they don't even know what the ask is. I mean, everyone's toddling. It's just a new paradigm. It's a new dynamic of business. And just like when people learn CLG and the 15 commitments, they, fuck it all up and weaponize it and make a mess. And we're just toddling. Like, it's all brand new stuff. And it's like evolutionarily appropriate for everyone to be like bumping into each other, trying to figure it out. But I get excited about where that leads and what kind of containers and space I want to hold and what I want to stand for in those bumpy places, I guess. So I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more than toddling for me, from what, like in the work I'm doing. When we go into organizations, we're going in because that organization is like, oh my God, we are waking up to this, and we do think we want to do something about it, but we have no idea what to do. And what I'm experiencing, so first we demystify that process for them. But what we've been talking a lot about is like envisioning liberation as kind of that the paradigm is so thick. Like, the paradigm of business is based, in my opinion, on power structures and patriarchy and consciousness around white supremacy. And it's so entrenched in what my friend calls the sick collective consciousness, or the context of these things, the intergenerational trauma of our country, I guess you could say, that the paradigm is so thick, people cannot imagine outside of the paradigm. So yes, it's toddling, but what I see is it's like freeze in terms of like a trauma response, because it's like, I can't think critically for myself. One, because I've been programmed and socialized in this way of being for so long. And like, when you ask me to imagine or envision something bigger or different, like, I can't even fully connect to that. And then my fear of doing it wrong, which goes to the point of like not being okay toddling, comes up as well.
I see that. I feel that, like, when I talk to CEOs, I feel that, and I do feel like a desire to actually do what you're doing, but not know how to do it. Where I see toddling is like what you're talking about as a process. So you have an entire continuum about how to be with that and do work around that. And a lot of companies are like, I have 6 hours to respond to something on social media and I need to make a decision right now about how we're going to do that. And then they do it and they're like, oh, that wasn't the right thing to do. That's where I experience a lot more toddling, where there's this like created pressure of time of like, I have to have it figured out. I got to do something, and not doing something is doing something. And that's where everybody gets really, it's more fight or flighty than freeze maybe sometimes. And I see a lot of just people starting to learn, some good lessons pretty quick.
Well, and what Toni, I think you were pointing to is, are you once an organization realizes that they're not, in alignment with the principles of their consumer, are they willing to actually shift the conditions of their organizational consciousness in order to get in more alignment with the consumer? And I think what you're pointing to, Bethany, is like a lot of times they're not. A lot of times they just want to like give you like something to feel better in the moment versus the conditions. Would you say that's right, Toni? Is that what you were kind of pointing to?
Well, what I'm finding, to Bethany's point, is there is a need to respond to the demand, right? The consumer wants to know what the ingredients are. And so in their urgency to respond to that, there is, it's posturing, for lack of a better, it's posturing. It's about making sure that the consumer feels safe enough to buy the product. But what I find is there's so much attention on the consumer and how to frame that up, that the actual business is not willing to put themselves through the culture that they are trying to create externally. And so it's a very vacuous thing to say that we are thinking about all the things that the consumer's thinking about, but we don't care about Helen and HR. We don't care about, and so like they're not willing to CLG themselves. They want to create the idea of CLG happening, but they're not actually willing to. I have two groups that I'm working with right now, and they're so busy. And I'll just give this as an example. They're going through all of the commitments. They're really focused. But then there are things that are happening within the collective. And this group is organizing itself to go out and be a translator and transmitter of new paradigm, but isn't willing to put their own culture. They're so busy readying themselves to respond externally, which is all of us, that they are not willing to actually care about the person in the collective that actually needs the healing and the support, because they're so busy thinking about how to get it ready to be out here, how to be performers of conscious leadership, but not actually embodied commitment of the consciousness. And that's what I'm finding is the transactional nature, performative transactional nature, that is a slippery slope, because I think, and I'm not making that bad, because all of it is still activation. When I look at it as a cosmic energy, there is still a governance of shift and awakening at any level. So that part of me takes it, and then the other part of me goes, but it's still not as deep and activated as I judge it should be, So
well, it's like what you said about the earth, right? What you were talking about the earth, you were saying, that like the humans, we hope to create humans that live in a way that we don't need to save an earth, and that the environmental conditions are just a representation of the internal conditions and consciousness of the people who live there. And it's like the same situation in all of these. It's like we don't necessarily, it's maybe I think that it's too uncomfortable to face our own ecosystem first. Which is, and then we go to hero, right? Or we are just having kind of a Slack conversation about this. We go to missionary, we go to savior, we go to, like, humanity is real good at that game. We've done it so many times over the course of history. And what I'm finding is it makes total sense, because when people do start to do the work of liberation, whether it's individually or organizationally, it's very disruptive. I mean, and so it's like, yeah, this is a lot, and not everybody is like signing up for that necessarily, So I've been getting curious about that, and I want to believe that we're in some kind of like bridging time where even that will get more easeful, like especially collectively. But right now, I think if we've been in complete denial or not facing, and then we start to wake up and want to face or disrupt, the contrast of the two worlds is very painful for our experience.
I see it as like an initial unwinding where it's like really chaotic. It's like companies are having an identity crisis because it used to be like a founder and here's my thing, and they would just, information would go one way and they would sell enough to survive or they wouldn't. And now there's all this two-way communication and there's all this market research and there's all this feedback, constant feedback. I feel like companies are almost like, what company do we want to be? Because everyone's so busy trying to be what people say they want them to be, which changes literally all the time. So everyone's in a constant like, well, should we be this? And should we be this? And how could we be that? And they want us to be this. And I feel like it's just like an identity crisis of, and where some support might want to happen is just like around alignment of like, who are you? What do you want to do? And what's your actual mission vision? And being so responsive and reactive to like people's demands, and what people want, it's like, I mean, ingredients are one thing, but there's like all these other aspects, like what kind of products are you going to make and what kind of people are going to make up your company and what are you going to stand for? And like, there's so many things. And like what we're working on is who are we going to buy from and what are their practices? And is that aligned? And even though we're like at the tip of the spear on a lot of that stuff, also like the people that we want to buy from don't always exist with the practices that we most want. So how are we going to support creating that? And what are we doing in the meantime? Like there's so many questions that companies have to answer. And then the market changes so fast now. Like it's so fast that I think people are just dizzy and overwhelmed and probably wanting to be more sure of themselves, but.
Well, and then consumerism becomes more about energetic alignment, right? Because if you're choosing who you want to buy from and like maybe that makes the price of mega food products go up because the farmers you choose X.
And it is up.
Right. Then as a consumer, I'm choosing, do I want to go with mega foods because they align to my values in the way that they deal with regenerative agriculture and the types of foods that they use to make their products? Or am I going to choose a vitamin that is cheaper because that's more aligned to my values? But there's the agency to choose, right? Because at least I know what you stand for and I get to decide from that sense of freedom, like, do I align with that or not?
Yeah. And we are like really feeling the pain all the time of selling a super premium product in the ways that it doesn't feel equitable. And we don't know how else to create equity over here with the people who do farm labor and the people who grow food. And so it's, we're always, in the policy world, I work on both sides of that, nutrition policy and equity and SNAP programs and WIC programs and funding around all of that and including things like supplements. And then, we have these larger structures, governmental structures that affect what we're able to create as a company, because if you were to buy a container of blueberries that were actually grown in a way that you actually felt okay, you felt remotely okay about how they were grown and who worked on them and how they were harvested and what those people got paid and what's happening in their community and what kind of healthcare and, did they have, how are they dealing with fires and smoke in California? And did they have gear for COVID? Did they have masks? Did they have somewhere that they can go in the sun? I mean, if people have all that stuff, you're going to pay like $25 for a container of blueberries. And so if we go and take care of the people who are growing and do the equity work on this side, you lose equity on the outside, like at the end of so that's a thing that I'm in all the time.
What do you think about that, Toni? What does that bring up for you? That conversation.
I was thinking so much was coming through me, but what I was thinking was the world is just getting more feminine, right? And so when we think about the linear way that we have conducted ourselves, and that business and consumption and capitalism has conducted itself from a very masculine perspective, and how that energetically enters us is it's left a lot out because the feminine energy is inclusive and thoughtful and considerate of things that are not necessarily linear. And so what I think about when I think about the environment and capitalism and the externalized costs that were never considered in how we consume, that now that the world is feeling more feminine and there is more inclusivity and more thoughtfulness, that the externalized costs that have always been there, and we've always paid for it in one way or another. We've always paid for the cost that so it's never been $25 for blueberries, but the $4.99 that they have been, I have paid for socially, environmentally. There's been the externalized costs have been absorbed and used to oppress something or someone. And so there's always been a price. So what I think about is now that I have to consider so much, and I think about a woman, right? I think about a mom. I mean, my role as mom. And so a dad and the whole traditional, what do they call it? The phenomena that is performative gender function. And how that enters into how we think about masculine and feminine energy as gender performance. When we put it in the gender performative function, the man's role is to go out and just consider the things that need to be protected and provided. And then I'm back here thinking about being the nurse and the maid and the healer and the teacher and the nurture, and I'm thinking about that laundry that's in the thing that's on the stove, and the baby's crying, and how much milk do we have left, and how many. And so my feminine self is constantly checking in on all of these different worlds, right? And then the masculine is just thinking about those things that are kind of linear and those things to do. So when I think about all of that within the context of the divine feminine reemerging on the planet, and those ways that we have to conduct business is just turning feminine. It has to consider more. It has to be more inclusive. It has to be more merciful, more compassionate. And I don't have the answers on how all that happens, but that's just what I make up, is we've gone from this masculine way of conducting things where it's just bottom line linear. And now we have to consider the social aspects of our decisions, the environmental aspects of art, which is more feminine and more thoughtful and more compassionate. And what I'm hoping for, and my vision for the world, is a world where the isness of all of these energies have a place to land in harmony with one another instead of being in conflict and war with one another. Just like, when we think about it in CLG, there is this, we always say the and allowing the non-binary way of being to kind of come in and govern how we are friendlier to these different ways that we are different. And I think about a lot of cultural axiology and the study of cultures and the study of value systems that run those cultures. And what I make up is we've never been in an above the line place with our contrast points. We've just always observed the contrast, the ethnic, cultural, class, race contrast points from a very below the line place. But in my fantasy world, in some dystopian future, we would get to a place where we can observe these contrast points as opportunities to harmonize. And I don't think we've ever been brave enough to get past all the shit so that we can get to that place. And it's just going to require a lot of acceptance of difference. And I don't know if we're brave enough as humans to do that yet, but we're getting there.
Companies don't feel very comfortable not knowing. And so that's the real tension point, I think, because we don't know how it looks. I don't know how to make a product that's affordable to everybody, that's the best nutrition they can make, that they can have access to, that they need, that's all drawn from food that was grown in an equitable way. And like, in the not knowing is pretty uncomfortable because the consumers are like, well, what about? And so I think that's part of the identity crisis, is like, how comfortable can you be with being like, I don't know, we don't know. and yeah, we don't know how to be above the line I don't know how to be above the line about climate change.
But there's so much here. So like I've been thinking a lot about that. We have this question we always ask, like, do we need to heal? The paradox of healing. But I've been thinking about, like, actually maybe it's just evolution. We're just evolving all the time, constantly. And what I say is healing is just evolution. And in evolution, there's balancing, and I just hear you talking about, like, we swung one direction that was probably really in service of our evolution for a short period of time, for like this burst of whatever industrialization we needed to create, and we're pulling back in a different direction. But I do think that it requires moving from, if we're going to use CLG language for this, in CLG, for listeners, there's 4 quadrants of leadership. To me as victim, by me as creator, and then there's through me, and then there's as me. And I think about our evolution as humans, like we were victims kind of at the effect of the environment, because this world was not created to center humans. So we had to figure out how to survive. I think our egos got the best of us, and we decided maybe I could kick reality's ass, and maybe like humans can be the center. And we created a world with that assumption. I don't think we've done a great job of that. And I think now this feminine to me is the earth being like, I gave you your chance. You got your moment to shine and see what you could do. Good job. Nicely done. And I'm back and I'm taking over. Maybe I'm willing to co-create with you if you're willing to get in alignment with the principles by which this whole planet functions, because we've been here way before y'all got here, and we were doing okay without you. So that's something that I think about with this conversation, and just that unknown piece to me is an indicator. As an individual, I'm in the unknown when it's time to surrender and to believe that there's something bigger than me at play, and I'm not the center of my reality. And I just imagine that for most of these leaders, that's the step that they're being called into.
And like, that's actually how businesses run. They're like, we are the center. And if we're not, how do we become more of the center of their consciousness? I mean, it's a complete paradigm shift. But I love working with nature as a model, because
right. Or the farmers as a model.
And it actually is a win for all. Like, if we keep trying to grow food the way we've been growing it, tilling the soil, releasing all of this carbon, killing the ecology of the soil, basically killing our topsoil, we're warming the planet, and we're desertifying topsoil, and we're having intense weather, and we won't have food security. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization said 5 years ago that we have 60 harvests left before we've destroyed the topsoil and can't grow food anymore. And so we can keep going the way we have been, but like, it's not a win for all. There's not going to be anyone to sell.
We're in the drama triangle. We're in the drama triangle, and we're committed to our destruction. And it's like, you can keep doing that and being committed to what you're committed to, or you could choose something else.
A lot of my gardens and the work that we've done, I purposely don't grow food. I am not an ag-based person, because I feel when we are working on food security, our gardens are all pollinator gardens. We do monarch ecology. We have way stations, bird sanctuaries, and we plant trees. That's what our organization focuses on, and water conservation. And so we look at space as a place to contribute and not to take, and that it's okay to grow food for species that are non-human. And so whenever we approach our spaces, it's always within a framework of consciousness that I am here to amplify the energy of this space, because I know that that is my sustenance and my support. And so a lot of the food security people, when I started back in 2012, and I started putting these way station and monarch gardens and pollinator gardens all over Bronzeville, they're like, what are tomatoes? What a collard green? What you over here doing? And
Be practical. Be practical.
yeah, that's out of touch with the dissonance shows up when it appears that the imagination is so eroded, much like topsoil, that the imagination is so eroded that the idea of me planting something that is non-consumable in this moment somehow doesn't serve me. The even idea that anything that I would be doing in community to restore the environment, even by my community, was considered unrelated to the priorities that we should be focused on as a community. And to even have a human being going, oh, you're planting trees and you're saving pollinators, and have a human being on this planet not be imaginal enough to understand how that supports all of my being, and that any concept could be at war with what I think is priority instead of the underpinning of and support of a thing that you're trying to do. And that we can't even imagine proactive care until crises. We can't imagine proactive care. We can't imagine, this whole COVID moment, this portal that we just moved through, is just a testament of how unwilling we are to be still and reflective of our wholeness, and that we would at all costs to humans move ahead as if nothing's at stake, and it's okay for a certain percentage of the population to kind of die off in effort to keep going. And we make these justifications all the time. And I just think constantly, just like that topsoil is eroded, these are just tiny little erosions to our humanity that we concede constantly. And by the time I get to a place where I'm ready to reconcile that, if I'm a person who is allowed so much, I'm devastated at the moment that I realize how much work I have to do to recultivate my consciousness, and how much work it would have to do to I think about turning our corner lots and brown lots into magical, monarch sanctuaries. And I'm always one of these people that can look at a corner lot and just see that that's effortless. That's just some seeds and some dirt and some sweat equity. And other people see an impossible task, or all they see is broken glass and they can't even imagine. And so I just am always playing with the willingness of my consciousness to fix a thing in here, and the willingness of my consciousness to fix a thing out there, so that I'm not miserable. But what I'm noticing more than ever is that my perception of misery is based on my desire to be liberated. And if you have no concept of that oppression, then you have no impetus to want to be free or to shift anything.
You can't even imagine what freedom is.
Exactly.
And I'm so turned on by this conversation. I cannot even tell you, if I could have an orgasm from this conversation,
you're welcome.
So turned on. I wish I'm not there yet in my tantric practice. So I'm just telling you, I'm having kind of an intellectual orgasm. But I think just witnessing and listening to both of you talk, you're clearly brilliant, first of all, but you're both creatively and outside of the box, imagining a new reality, a new possibility, while also honoring kind of what is, and honoring the gifts of the earth as they already exist. You know what I mean? Not we need to create something totally different. Actually, we could just honor what's here, but we could do it in these other ways. And that, it just very much aligns also to the way that I'm thinking about my work right now. And I guess I want to say that I feel like my role in support of what you're doing is to go around and liberate people as individuals, so they're available to start imagining something else and recognizing, like, I think through my own journey of lots of different levels of oppression, and then supporting other people who had, were in oppressive situations, not by choice, right? And recognizing like all the tools and gifts and things that were offered to disrupt our internal oppression. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm thinking about, Toni, like how you became you. And I know that's a big question, but I'd love to just, for our listeners to know you better, like your personal evolutionary journey, or if you want to call it your healing journey. I don't know what it means to you at this point in your life, but how did you become who you are today?
That's in process all the time. And I just want to shout out to Cynthia Jean Anderson. Her birthday is today. My mom would be 71 years old if she were still in this dimension.
Happy birthday, Cynthia. Let's hold her for a moment. I feel her called in.
So I'll start with, that's how I am who I am, is that woman. And so tied to her is the story of how she started. And my mom was an Arkansas farm girl, who was the daughter of a sharecropper who ended up owning his own land, and whose grandmother was a Native American woman who married him so that they could combine their land. And the orientation of first migration Southern Blacks who came to the North is to return to the South for the summer. That's like the order of things, is you get out of school and you go back down South to work the land and be with your people, because the North was still a very strange place that you only came here to get away from the crazy in the South. So she grew up with an orientation of going home every summer to visit her land and her people. By the time she was like 14, 15, her grandmother and grandparents, they perished, and then the land it wasn't ritualistic for her to return. But she had a value system of wanting to give us the experience of getting away from the city in the summertime. She was a single mom of 2 children, and so she booted us to resident camp every summer. And it was the first time that I, as an urban girl growing up on the south side of Chicago, understood that there were other dimensions and other realities here. And when I went to camp for the first time and sat under trees and saw a tree canopy and really surrendered to the energy of nature, I realized that there were a million other things, other voices, and other orientations, and it broke me open. And when I came back to the city, I saw nature people and I heard nature vibrations, and humans became less interesting to me in that moment. And then, and as a result, nature has always been the balm that I have sought when humans become too taxing for my understanding. And my wholeness and how I heal myself has always been tied to those first initial experiences. So the things that I've been through in my life, which we could go into a million things, but the bottom line is that I am a person that is inspired to heal all my limitations in partnership with the natural rhythms of the planet. And knowing that these other dimensions that show up as nature on this planet is medicine, and it is whole medicine for your heart, your brain. And somehow in my young body, I figured that out. And even though I've been through all the things, something in my young programming got very activated to understand my inherent resilience based on how I observed nature's cycles. Somehow in my young brain, I knew that I was no different than the birth renewal cycle. So somewhere in my development, no matter what has struck me as a limitation, I think I have always observed it as a natural thing. Even in the worst, cancer, sexual assault, losing family members, illness, the worst things that I have encountered in this reality, something about me has always accepted it as a cycle. And so I observe the highs and lows, just like of my life, the way I observe the seasons. And somehow I know a tree's never dead in winter. And so there's a part of me that understands. There's a part of me that is low and probably like invisible in my ability to thrive beyond this moment, but there's something in there waiting on sun. And the minute that's like I move a little bit closer to the sun, that flower will pop out. And so can I live with the moment of dieback that I'm feeling right now, knowing that it inherently gives birth to something else, even if I don't know it. And that's a long ass way of saying something in me has always understood this. And I have not always been able to articulate it, and to define it and to convey it and to even believe it in some ways, but that's just always been there. And it's made my showing up with people on the planet an odd thing because of the trust that I have in myself.
There's always like a moment in every podcast where somebody drops a word and it's like you dropped the word, like the living word. And I was like it's so interesting because the other day I was just fighting against the universe. I'm like, I hate this. This is and then this other part of me is like, I know I'm a spoiled brat. I know I'm spoiled and child. I understand this is cycles. I understand this is how you work. I fucking hate this. I hate this. Why do you? It's like, and so when I hear you, like, my body wanted to be like, yes, the cycles. And I aspire to have that level of trust and surrender, and I think it's such a gift that it's something that has just been a natural awareness. And it feels even more than just awareness. It feels like a oneness that you've in your cells, like a oneness with what is. That's how it felt when you talked about it.
And I don't know if I've heroed myself with nature my whole life. I don't know. I don't know if I just went, that tree will make me feel better, and I just made it. I don't know. But whatever it is, it worked. And it feels friendly, and it feels natural and organic. It doesn't feel like anything that I muscle for. And it always works. Every single time I've been at my most broken, I've just sat at a body of water and have somehow felt equilibrium.
I think it's our medicine. I think it really is our medicine. I think that's the irony of the environmental crisis and all the things. I had this moment when in some healing work I was doing where I'm like, the earth can hold me. Like, that's the thing I'm surrendering to, not this like white man with a beard in the sky or some existential thing that I don't even understand. Like, no, actually the earth itself can hold me. I can surrender to the rhythms and the flows of this planet where I am right now. And that's been like a really big mindset shift recently. And there's just a part of me that believes like if we were connected to our bodies and connected to the earth in either order, whichever one came first, a lot of these other things wouldn't even, that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, they wouldn't even be a thing.
One of the things that I felt a big shift around was just the difference of like, just the idea that we are one thing and the earth's another thing, because we're just carbon and water, and like a tree growing is literally just removing carbon from the atmosphere versus photosynthesis that you learned about in 6th grade and turning it into a tree, and then we eat it, and it's like there's a lot of oneness shit going on. like there is no separation. And then one really trippy thing, I mean, I've been learning a lot about soil ecology and microbes in the soil and fungus in the soil and what makes for healthy soil. And there's so many more microbes in our body than there are human cells, there's a fair, decent case for like we are just walking around in service of microbes because they're in our gut and we eat and feed them, and then like our bodies decompose. Like we might think we're here doing a whole bunch of stuff, but actually it's just like much smaller life forms that are using us to do their bidding. And I kind of liked that because it felt like for a minute I could feel that we're all on the same team a little bit, and there wasn't like a people versus planet and this othering and this like battle for power or who's going to do the thing. And it just felt like, oh, there's just a concert, and we can just choose how we're going to be with it more.
Mm-hmm.
I came into environmental stuff in a totally different way, which was through people. Like all the stuff that I've gotten into, I mean, I definitely just was scared, came in just being real scared. Like, I don't want to die. I don't want all the people I know to die. Like, I want people to be okay. But the more that I've been with this work, it's like, how good it feels to me when I'm working with people that I feel really aligned with. And then like we create something, or like just even how far the regenerative agriculture movement in our space has come in the last 5 years. No one knew what that word even meant. We didn't have a definition for it 5 years ago. And now it's, there's 100 brands at Target that have something about regen on their packaging, like, so it's just like how it's just so fun. Actually, I'm having so much fun working with people who care about the same stuff, and we work on this stuff. I mean, that's what it's always been about for me. I'm like social subtype on the Enneagram, and like, and even like you were talking about your mom, and I'm like, I got this all from my dad. And my dad passed also. He passed in June, 13 years ago, and he was like a white businessman who started a business, but he was like beloved. He was kind of shy, maybe even awkward, but he was beloved in his industry. And I actually thought about Arkansas because we used to call on Walmart. I worked for his company for a period of time too, and we would go to Walmart, and that's when I saw my dad like in action. And people loved him. Like, he really knew how to connect with people, and the projects he was working on, like, people were like, I love Mac Laser, so like, yeah, let's do it. And it just how much like empathy and connection, how powerful that is for like alignment and movement on things. That's became really apparent to me with my dad. I remember his funeral, we had like 500 people at the wake, lines down the street. People flew in from all over the country that worked with my dad, like from the pharmaceutical industry and the pharmacy industry and stuff like that. And I was like, holy shit. But that's where I learned a lot of that stuff. And it's like, I just love people so much. I love to work with them so much that we end up creating really fun stuff together. And it happens to be mostly about planet stuff. I mean, every time I've ever done a medicine journey, climate change, it's like polar bears on ice caps. And I mean, there's a lot of clear messages for me about the thing I care about. But when I think about like, why am I really doing this? It's just like I fell into it because that's where people and connection in my communities led. And it's been so easy to just go and do this stuff. And it feels easy to work on this stuff. But it's it feels people-centric in my world.
Yeah, mine. Yeah, I would say that I intentionally went into it because of Erin, my daughter. And she was small, and we were in Atlanta at the time. And it was just about like, I noticed a value system in me wanting to be translated to her. And it was the same one that my mom picked up when she was learning how to be in communion with the planet because of the hybrid of her cultures. She had a reverence for ground and air and animal and and I don't, and so what I realized is like an urgency, and I'd been ill and so one of the crazy stories that I'm activated all the time in is I will leave before Erin is ready. So that's a big in my I got to download it now. I got to get it out now because I'm going to check out, because that, it's a big sickness and illness, and early death is a big story in my life. And so that gets activated in me by the desire to get her ready for things and have her know things, right? And so she was little, and I'm just the parent that likes to go camping on the weekend and likes to take a tent in the middle of nowhere. And so we'd go up to the Blue Mountains all the time. And I was always packing her little preschool friends and their parents who wants to go and find a patch of grass and lay down on it together. And that's kind of what I was doing on my weekends. And then I just became the tent mom, not the soccer mom, but the tent mom and the sleeping bag mom. And then I noticed a village of youth always around me doing these outdoor things. And so once I got the message from the universe that I was not to be in corporate anymore, and I was actually to dedicate myself to something else, images of me planting trees with youth, me, butterflies everywhere around me just kept coming in as images. And so when I got intentional about doing, when I started to get an awareness that this was a code, a coded wisdom that I was actually needing to translate. And the messages got tied into this bigger idea of how do we prepare our youth to inherit a planet and not just take over its problems, but take over its beauty and its possibility, and not just a bunch of leaders that need to be prepared to fix all the shit we fucked up.
Right. Honor the legacy.
Exactly. But really be prepared to honor the beautiful things that we did well, because we do things well, that we as humans are scripted to think about all the things we don't do. And as a community of color, we are also scripted to see our community as threat. And there's beauty and nature and everything. There's grass growing out of a crack somewhere. And if we can script ourselves to see all of that as possibility, then that's how I used environmental awareness as a tool to shaping the imagination of people of color who have been handed a script of limitation. So I actually am, I always say I'm not really an environmental person. I use the environment as a way to tweak consciousness on what's possible. And the environment is just a blank canvas, and a case study of how we get to right size and right align with things that we're not in harmony with, including ourselves.
And what have you learned on that journey about healing? Like using the environment to shift consciousness. Like what have you learned about healing?
I think the same thing that I've learned throughout my whole life is that healing is cyclical. It shows up as every and anything, just like nature. If we're not careful, we can believe something that appears as threat or destruction, like a mosquito. Healing shows up in a myriad of different ways. And if we're not careful, we will start. Like, I really liked your question about when you said that you all started with the idea of, does something need healing? And I think about that when I go into communities and I decide something is needing to be more pretty than who am I to decide something? But I think about the fact that I'm not really deciding anything. I'm just allowing something that's already here to have more space. And so what I've learned about healing is to just give it space that it needs. And transformation is just the slowest process sometimes. And I have to have the patience and the same trust in the cyclical nature. Like, I just know summer is, I don't panic every time a leaf falls in the fall, because I know it's going to be back. And that's the kind of thing that I think I've learned most about healing community is to don't predetermine what it looks like, and to just give it as much room as it needs, and that I'm really not here to do anything but to be a gardener, for lack of a better word, is to just notice what needs watering, what needs weeding, what needs more soil, what needs more sun. But I'm not here to really like determine what wants to grow. Is not my job. It's just whatever does want to grow. Am I here to be supportive to whatever that looks like? And do I have the tools? That's kind of, and I guess I'm not in charge. That's what I've learned. I don't ever want my ego to think it's in charge of anybody's healing, including, I just want to be in a place where I'm allowing things to do what they're already going to do.
That really is the tension though, right? Because like where I find myself around just the idea of activism, of like, okay, if I'm going to be the resolution, if I'm a life force and I have power to create something, if I'm in a complete state of surrender, sometimes I confuse myself about like, well, do I do anything? Like, and where are the whispers, and where when you're listening to what wants to happen next, that's that balance. Like we've been way over maybe on like, this is what I want. And maybe there's this other side of the polarity, which is like what you're talking about, what I feel you standing for. And I think what you said is really powerful about empowering people for what the things they did that were good, because there's this way where we can be like, yes, this is white supremacy and it's egoic and it's extractive and this is what business is all about and it's bad. And there's this other way where it's like, we're really good at doing stuff. Like when we have a goal, like we really know how to do it. Like, and the life force of the human race, is so powerful. And so like our I'll judge it as broken agricultural system, the goal was get the most food that looked the similar of a few certain types to be the most stable at the least cost without concern for these other things. And that's what we did. We did it great. We did that fucking great. It doesn't like work long term, but like that same life force that can really like move things along. And like if there was that balance of by me and through me and we were focused on creating something and it was in harmony and it was within balance and it worked with the cycles and it accounted for more wholeness, we're really fucking good at that too. And like, that's one of the things we're good at. So I think
the irony though is that in consciousness, like the same consciousness that thinks it's creating something was always as me a part of everything at the same time. So it's actually just our awareness that believes it's us creating anything. And so that it's like to me, it's like getting in right relationship with like, yeah, like as me, the universe got to feel important, or as I pretended that I was doing this by myself with my life force, and I got to feel how powerful it is to be a creator like the universe is. But if I stay there and I don't realize like the universe, I'm always just been like a cell in the body of all that is. Mm-hmm. And I've always just been doing the thing that I was created to do in alignment with the thing that everything else is doing. That's the right relationship that I think we're moving towards is. And I think there's some, because of the nature of humanity, like I feel it almost like the universe or earth is like, I want you to feel the humility of the difference. Like I want you to feel like that we honor your creative power. And when your awareness is so focused on you and what you can do, that's exciting. Yay. Like a little kid, like when we see our kids like do something new, it's like we want them to be proud. But then eventually we want to be like, I paid for that shit. Like don't forget I was here the whole time, and my genes are what made you athletic or whatever. So yeah, I'm just repeating myself. But yeah, it's like where we place our awareness to me more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, I let all the states of leadership just kind of flow. Like sometimes I feel very as me, sometimes I feel very by me, sometimes, and I'm okay with all of it. Like what I think for me, like, and I don't know if this is, I turned 52 a week ago. And I think for me, I'm at a receptivity age where the efforting is no longer sexy. I'm done. But what I believe is just like, to Bethany's point, like I got a lot of people during this time were very confused about what do I do, right? And what does activism look like? And I believe activism is activating whatever you feel is, because whatever it is that you're putting up and out, there is a vortex of energy that is going to get created around it, and it will magnetize and attract what it needs to attract. And in the isness of that, things will just happen. By you just being who you are, believing who you are, there is a frequency of congruence somewhere out there that will just attract itself. It doesn't require you to do anything but be in a belief about you, like to your point of like where you're placing your consciousness. So, I had a lot of like stuff going on in the community about what activism and protest look like. And what I want us to get liberated is it looks like everything. It looks like everything. And just like when we sit in a field of nature and the ants are doing their job and the birds are up there doing theirs, everything in between has a frequency of attraction that is a vortex within its own kingdom. There's a plant kingdom. There's, there is a myriad of things going on. If we make one part more important, the bird's more important than the fish, and and it's like, I just believe, be a fish, be an aphid, be an ant, but be whatever you're going to be, because probably there's a kingdom and a vortex of congruence out there. And within that, that's going to shift and change whatever it needs to be, because that's the whole reason the frequency existed. I tend to, in this part of my life, not get too distracted with the politics of being, because I think that's where the frequency of being can get lowered when we think about how to push it through stuff. And I would just rather be, to keep it as full as possible, because when I enter into scarcity and othering, and I pull myself from oneness because I believe that there is something out there, and I'm an 8. I need the idea of an adversary in order to locate my juice. And what I've learned in my older, more evolved states is like, I love the fact, I went to Persona Party when I did an intensive. And one of my personas was, is I don't know.
I got the I'm an 8 and I've got an I don't know.
I don't know. I stuck my thumb in my mouth. I put on a big unicorn fleece onesie because that was as close as I could get to a toddler's onesie. And I just refused to answer any questions. And I don't know the whole time. And when I think about that only in the context of what you're saying about businesses being at a place where they really just don't know, and how scary and surrendered that feels. But I also think about the fact that in that moment, I felt the most liberated and the most possible, because I wasn't in such guardianship of what I thought I believed and what I knew. And to fall into like the scary and get past the layer of scary and open myself up fully to the idea of not knowing, meeting its end. Like part of my ego was annihilated in the end of like, I think something bad's going to happen if I don't know. Getting through that into the place where I don't know actually represents the most possibility, the most, and just surrendering to the idea, like when I work with organizations, just getting them to navigate the abyss and the annihilation of not knowing, to get to the freedom of the not knowing. The not knowing means I can let go of what I thought I believed. I can let go of systems that didn't work. I can let go of everything that my ego needs to understand as a reality. Then I can rescript, reprogram, recreate, rebuild anything. And It's just the scary of that first bit of falling into the thing we don't know. I believe that's where we all are. And some of us are falling through abysses of like, what the hell? And some of us are like, I know exactly what this is. Can we depend on each other? Is where I see the synergy. Is there a lot of people who our work in the world did not make any sense until now. And so that's where I see like, most of us, I don't know, I've heard a lot from the conscious communities that for the first time they feel resonant, useful, and not like they've just been building a crazy ark in the middle of nowhere that nobody understood. But now Noah makes sense to the planet, right? We see the water, we know why he's been building it, and let's get on the thing. And so for me, for all those who are still in the abyss of the unknown, there are those who anchor it well. And that's where the yin yang synergy of like, that's where I believe we don't need to do anything because there are plenty of seekers right now. And those seekers are ready to make a shift in the world. Let's just focus on them and let's stop believing that there are too few of them. And let's get our focus off of the people who don't actually want to hear from us, are resistant. And then what could happen? Because then I believe we can go and play bigger. Because I'm not spending all of my juice trying to keep myself amplified against resistance, that my juice is intact because I'm actually magnetizing all these people to me who are resonant, congruent, and ready. And there are plenty of that energy on the planet. I do not believe that there is a deficit of people who are ready to shift this thing. And I think that's the first thing the conscious community needs to do, is to stop thinking that it's us against them. There is no, everybody ready. That's what I think. And then
yeah, because evolution always wins. And if you're at the edge of evolution, you know, that's where the momentum is. I have this meme on my phone, and it's kind of, when you're talking about I don't know and the potentiality, it says, the freer I get, the higher I go. The higher I go, the more I see. The more I see, the less I know. The less I know, the more I'm free.
That's it. And I think the Tao says something to that effect. Is the more mastered you are, the more you will have a sense of not knowing anything.
The Tao that can be Taoed is no longer Taoed. It's always, you know, as soon as we think we understand what evolution is doing, as soon as we think we know where the planet is going, is a new thing.
Yeah. Which is good, because that means we can keep not knowing, and we can,
and it keeps us busy.
right.
And I appreciate your your kind of like life force juice, like just where you led, like what's happening, like, and just trusting that and going with it, because I can probably get pretty heady about like shoulding and am I as me versus this versus that, blah, 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 and thinking about all the constructs, I guess. And so there is a way where the story is true in one way for me, that I did this and I did that and I did that, and another way I didn't even try to do it. Like any of the things that I've like accomplished, I didn't even try to do it. It all literally just happened around me. And so it's actually both are true at the same time. Because when I'm doing the thing that I'm like, that's it. This is it. And I was in a meeting today with our we have a consultancy that helps us with strategy. And I was like, well, what do you think about this opportunity? Should we do that? And he's like, I mean, your whole deal's just been kind of opportunist. And I'm used to that word in with a negative connotation. But he's just like, well, like things just keep falling in your lap, Bethany. Like this is just probably the perfect next thing to do. That's been working for you. Just keep doing that kind of thing. And I was like,
all right, just keep waiting for the luck to show
just
up.
Keep letting shit happen. Whatever's, if you know, these invitations are dropping constantly. And I'm like, that's true. Like all the big stuff, people that come to me like, well, what do you want to do? You want to? And I'm like, okay. And I've pretty much just been saying yes to stuff.
And then whatever consciousness and intention you have with transforming the world, whatever you're doing paired with that consciousness is making that happen. I had no ecology, environmental science background, no youth development background. I just thought a thing and believed a thing and got up and said, I'm sure there's somebody else who's thinking like me, because there's just no way that can't be. I'm in a consciousness of one. So my we're celebrating 9 years of this organization where we've done crazy, tremendous things across the planet. And I had no preparation for that other than a desire, a willingness, and a thought. And that's how I have like some idea that it really just is about your energetic intention and commitment that produces the thing. And in that, it actually doesn't produce anything. It just creates a space of isness for your consciousness to land outside of yourself.
And the energy just keeps moving.
Exactly.
I think a theme that's emerged, I think, for me in this podcast too, that feels like it's building on what you're saying is like a decentering of humans too. Like that we're valuable, but we're just one of so many species, beings. And it's like that thing that's happening in us is not just happening in us. It's also happening in the trees, in the water, in the animals, like in all of the things around us. And we're all in this dance together, right? Versus the other way around.
And the deep irony is that decentering us is ultimately better for us.
Right.
And that's what, we probably just didn't realize as much before, but it just feels more and more true.
This was so fun.
I could talk like till tomorrow. I have as you're speaking, there's like 75 things I would build on, but maybe we'll just have to go round 2.
It's very rare that I meet an environmentally conscious CLG person. So this is a very big treat for me.
Lauren kept it all secret. She's just like, yeah. Like I was like, who are we talking to? And then she was just over there giggling. We were like, wait, you do what?
I was going to text you this, Toni, after, but I'm going to just say it publicly. Like, I feel so fucking honored to know you. Like, every time I'm in your presence, I'm just like, your aura, like, you're just fucking the shit. I don't know what else to say. Like, your being. I have a crush on your beingness.
Oh, I have a crush on your beingness. And I was just thinking about you. I was like, last week, right before I looked at my schedule for this week, I was just like, we promised that we would connect before the podcast is here.
I thought that too.
Well, I'm going to look you up next time I come to Chicago.
Yeah, please do. We've got so much going on. I just completed my first Eco CLG for youth.
Eco CLG for youth. Oh my God.
Yeah. So like environmental and social justice leaders to come together and get the first 6 and to see what it would be to apply a lens of a hybrid of eco spiritualism, social justice, and environmental justice to a group of influencers in the city who are out here already beginning to lead in these ways. And my fear is that they're going to pick up toxic leadership styles, perpetuate a lot of broken leadership activism. And could we get them before that, especially before the summer opens up and they're all back out there doing their thing and influence. And now they've got CLG as a download and how to activate themselves. And I'm really interested in seeing what this first group is going to do with it and how their activism shows up through a CLG framework. So I'll keep y'all posted about that.
I want you to come to Hawaii with me.
My arm.
And P.S. If you are going to Hawaii, I'll be the assistant. I'll make the bed or whatever it is. I'll run some white affinity groups on the side or whatever.
Yeah, we got to talk about Hawaii. I want to talk to you.
Twist my arm, Bethany. Yeah, well, this has been great. I certainly want to stay connected to both of you for a number of reasons. And I just have to come out of my like cubby hole of crazy to be more intentional and conscious in those connections.
We're all 3 in a cubby hole of craziness.
We're on a cubby hole right now. I was saying today, I just like broke down because I'm like, my experience is like the more that I get in tune with these cycles and all the things that I need to like just really truly live or thrive, like I can manage so much less really in my life in terms of like how much I get done in a day, how many tasks. So it's like if you're responsible for one other human at the least, plus yourself, plus a job, like I'm like, plus I'm like trying to thrive in my own being, like, and my value is interdependence, but I keep struggling like fully embodying that. And I was just thinking so much today about how if it was a more if I was living more communally, you know, in a way that was healthy and, you know, supportive and truly interdependent, like I see how that allows you to experience connection while also managing the things that life requires.
I think the big oneness step we all need to take is the one where we call in a very, you know, multiversal village around our hearts, heads, and guts. Like, I need a fully functioning system around each of those locations. And so if I have people who are not a match to I need a village around how I think, a village around how I feel, and a village around my supportive choices to my being. And militarizing that, not operationalizing, but militarizing that has been my saving grace of, and it's helped me come out of a story of othering. Because a lot of times I can other by like, it's just me, it's all on me, and and not knowing that, like, how could that possibly, there's a gazillion beings on the planet, and there's trees and flowers, and how could it possibly be that I keep meeting the one in me that wants to feel sorry for myself and alone? I'm over her. So let's militarize the opposite ideas. And since then, and I think I've been really like efficient at the strategy since September, and my life has just flipped completely upside down because I feel like lazy and how much I don't have to manage anymore, because I really do have partnership and a lot now that my brain would not allow me to transcend the idea that I am unsupported and alone. Because, Enneagram's 8, we need that. We need that.
You need to feel that way. Yeah. Well, 4s have their own version of that.
Okay, I've had a couple really weird thoughts today, and I want to share them, but also I want to like tie together some of what you guys both just said. Like, I mean, we've been talking about like companies and even the human race as this like and then, all this stuff that we have to learn from nature as this ecosystem and with all this interdependence. And what you're talking about community, and Lauren, like being a single mom and like being responsible for a kid. Like, I just spent Labor Day weekend in my house alone with my 2 boys. It rained all 3 days, and my fridge was broken, unplugged, defrosted, and my sink broke. And I couldn't run the sink, and I was like, holy shit. It was really hard. And like, there's a way where I think it is more natural for us to all be living in community with each other and supporting each other. And like, somebody cooks for 5 people, and not everyone has to cook their own little tiny meal every night. And it's like, there's real parallels with all of that, cycles, seasons, help, co-regulation, interdependence that we see in nature and in natural cycles that I think is missing in community. And we've just been through COVID, and it's like even more separation, even more like, so like it was magnified separation. And so I just feel that wanting to balance in so many ways. And when you're talking about like militarizing, I've been like, a weird thought I had today. I was actually just like getting a sandwich before this podcast. I was wharfed it down right before we started, but I was like, I saw a guy with these 2 little kids, and I was like, wow, there's a way in which, and I have 2 kids, that it's like really selfish to like want to have kids. And I know that that's just like one voice in my head who has that opinion, that everyone wants to have their own kids and their own family and their own house and their own car and their own this, their own, like everyone wants to have all of those things. And I'm like, it would be so much easier. I mean, I co-housed with my best friend for years, and we shared all these responsibilities with all.
So does Toni. So did Toni.
Oh my God, Toni, we have so much. My best friend Liz. And it's like, it's so much better. And I'm like, and even how much trouble people are having, maybe even getting pregnant and stuff like that these days, and then feeling super isolated when they have a child and they don't have support. And it's like, we should just get like 5, 6, 7 adults together, give them 1 or 2 kids between the whole mess of them. Everybody can help each other. We'll live in houses like that. We'll all like take care of each other. There could be different ages. There can be people who are
Don't ever build a new building or cut down another tree because there's plenty of buildings.
Everyone can live. Like, we had 9 people in this fucking house for the first half of COVID, and it was a blessing.
Yes.
Alone.
Yes. I believe in the village. I believe in it. I've seen it work. It's, when you go to Africa and you spend time, I'm like in the middle of this is Africa, like not developed Africa at all. In Amboseli, and there's like literally, there is no such thing as somebody else's kid. There is no such thing as somebody else's husband. There's the men drop off food to all the houses. If you see a kid running around, it's yours. It's not this idea of this colonized way of, the Industrial Revolution really gave us coupled with the Depression, it really gave us this idea of, nuclear family, and an individualized family creates so much othering. And in my community, it's about village. We don't make it without village. You don't make it without village. You don't make it without somebody helping somebody, because how could we have gotten through all of what we've gotten through if we can't rely on each other, no matter what the news stories or all the things in modern urban life would have you believe? The whole axiology of Black people is relationship building and getting the thing done, because ain't nobody else gonna do it. And so the idea of village is like central to how we move and organize. Everybody's a TT, everybody's an uncle, and you don't know these people. That's just, hey sis, hey bruh. We automatically try to create relationship just by what we call each other, because we have a dependency to know you as family in order to feel like we can get something done. So I just believe in the power of the village, and I just wish it was the way the whole world worked. It's just the most natural way to be, is to consider the whole block in what I'm doing. And anything that we have been participating in that will have us think otherwise is creating the false idea of it's not oneness. And village building is the first place that we get to, the tribal level of the first iteration of life, and understanding that everybody in your family and everybody in your village is an extension of your own way of being. If you can get the oneness dealt with within your immediate, then you can start to observe the world as more of an extension of that same practice. And the same graces that I need to give my cousins and uncles and my neighbor, if I can treat them, if I can see my neighbor who doesn't drive, doesn't look, doesn't eat like me, and know that by neighboring we are in a oneness, then I can trick my consciousness into starting to see those possibilities of relationship beyond my block, beyond my family, and maybe the people across the world that I deem are so different than me. I can start to understand that they're just cousins that have been handed different beliefs. And they were programmed into a belief system just like I was.
And it's that same decentering of the single person, and that it actually is supportive to you to be in community, to be in that cycle of freely giving and receiving with each other within a group.
I had to talk to you more, Bethany, because you and I have so much in common.
Yeah, y'all need like a little coffee chat or something. Seriously, I'm feeling this connection. I'm reading this book, The Map of Consciousness, and it's really interesting. It's the guy that wrote Power versus Force, and Dr. David Hawkins, and he studied like over 22 years people's emotions, their kinesiology, and basically created kind of a chart to map emotions to levels of consciousness. And one of the things he says in there is that consciousness is the principles you choose to live your life by. And I'm like, I don't know. I just to think of it that way. But I'm, teaching a lot about holding liberation and holding love consciousness and doing whatever you think activism looks like for you and your creative expression from the consciousness of love. Because if we're doing it from a consciousness of fear, we're just perpetuating the same cycles. And so when I hear you talking about the other, and even, people as my brothers and my sisters and all of that, there's a principle there's a principle of love. There's a principle of oneness that you're choosing to see your world through. It creates emotions and it creates energy and it creates a vibration, but it's also principled, And I just think that there's something really important about naming that. I felt empowered to choose love consciousness through my principles and not necessarily just my vibration or just, my emotional state, but like through my principles, I can choose to say like, I'm having a reaction to that person. We seem really different. I seem separate from them, but what would the principles of love, how would the principle of love see them? How would the principle of love hold them? What would the principle of love choose as a consciousness?
Yes. I had one of my mentors, consciousness mentors. She always says, in the moment of resistance, ask what love wants. And so whenever I'm in a meeting or anywhere and there's tension or I feel there's something going on, and then I just ask what love wants, and then I kind of sit back and watch my body and watch what's happening in the room. And usually I can start to identify the consciousness of scarcity. I can name the thing that feels like it's, like either there's love wants. If I observe it through that lens, usually I can get to a place where I can observe the idea that people believe is not being activated. You know what I mean? Just watching the room, there's a belief here that there's not enough money for what we're talking about. There's a belief here that there's not enough time for what we're talking about. There's a belief that there's not enough commitment or energy or whatever. And love can kind of say, love wants more time. Love wants a belief, and the scarcity, approval, security, control narrative starts to come in. And usually love is asking for something around that to be reconciled. Just like we say, anger wants to be acknowledged, joy wants to be celebrated. Love wants something, and it's very demanding. Love is a demanding energy. And the idea that we think that it is this like, love is coming in to organize itself.
It's disruptive.
It is disruptive. And so all of the things, and I know we've all said it in consciousness and conscious thinking communities, of the gift of Trump and the gift of all of this. What I truly believe is love is asking for reconciliation. And everything that we are looking at right now is in service to the vibration of love. And love is saying, move this shit out of the way. Move racism. Move sexism. Move this fucked up shit around this planet. Move the hatred against Black bodies. Move police brutality. Move all of this out of the way, because I am coming. I am here. And this must go.
We got to get in right relationship with the energies that allow evolution to thrive.
And so I see this as love justice. I don't see this as anything really third dimensional. This is organizing the third dimension to be in service, and all those things that have not been in service to love have to get disrupted. And it feels uncomfortable, but it's not the truth. It's not the truth of everything. What I'm looking at is the itchiness and pussiness and bloodiness of a wound that needs to heal. And we can keep slapping Band-Aids on it. But if we want true healing, if we want healing from the inside,
Get that love justice come in.
so I just have a trust that what we're looking at is love justice and nothing else.
I want to come to the Church of Toni for real. Like every time we do this, I get a word, but like, oh, my soul needed to hear this message today. I have a quote for us if we're complete. I don't want to rush, but
Yes, we're complete.
This is a Byron Katie quote that's painted on my wall in my bedroom. There's nothing you can do with love. All you can do is experience it. That's as intimate as you can ever be with another human being. You can hug them, kiss them, feed them, give them all your money, give them your life, and that's not it. Love is nothing you can demonstrate or prove. It's what you are. As you open to the experience of love, it will kill who you think you are. It will have no other. It's that part. That's the love justice. It will have no other but the right relationship of who you are to love.
There you go. There you go.
Hey everybody, if you've got any feedback for us, we welcome it, or ideas about future guests, email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com. We are at Healing Podcast on Twitter, and we are at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Monda Creative, who edits all of our podcasts, and Two Tall Women Productions, who produce. Thank you.